Walking into a Swedish bank and asking for $1 million in cash might sound straightforward. But in a country where most transactions are digital, could you walk out with that money? And would the bank even have that much cash available? Before diving into those questions, let's understand how Sweden became the world's most cashless country. At one point, cash flowed freely across Sweden. In the early 2000s, it was common to walk into any store, hand over some krona, and get what you needed. Cash was the method of choice in over 40% of all transactions in the country. It was used daily, from minor transactions in cafes to larger purchases in retail stores, and ATMs were widely used for withdrawals. Sweden was still a cash-based economy at that time, with people carrying cash for most everyday expenses. However, by 2024, things had drastically changed. Cash now makes up less than 2% of all transactions, and that figure continues to decline consistently. So how did this happen? How did a country that once carried cash in every pocket move toward barely accepting it at all? In Sweden, the transition to a cashless society wasn't a big event, but an organic change that quietly took shape alongside technological and social developments. The big break came in 2012 with Swish, a mobile payment app that enabled real-time bank transfers between individuals and stores. It became a game changer. Today, more than 80% of Swedes use it regularly. The convenience of Swish and contactless card payments quickly outweighed the need to carry physical money. Sweden is quickly migrating to electronic payments rather than using old-fashioned physical money. Data from Riksbanken as of July 31st, 2024 clearly illustrates the severe decline in coins and bills, influenced by various factors and policies.
I think Sweden is ahead with this cashless society compared to other countries is because we have a big trust in the government, the system, the banks, the authorities.
Digital safety is a non-issue in Sweden today. We have reliable systems, nobody really thinks about it as an issue.
In the retail industry, there's about 80% of all the transactions is made by cards and about 20% with cash. And these numbers is increasing, the card transactions.
It's not just legitimate currency, though. Much of it is no longer accepted in stores. The Swedish Central Bank reported that cash in circulation fell by over 40% in the last decade. While cash accounts for less than 2% of total transactions, around 6% of the population still relies on cash for regular use, mainly among the elderly and rural communities. Coins are almost disappearing from use, with the 2016 series being one of the latest major productions. Since then, banks have reduced the amount of cash they hold, making it much harder for people to withdraw large sums. If you were to walk into a bank in Sweden today and request $1 million, it would likely take the banking system by surprise. Most banks no longer stockpile large amounts of physical cash. You'd probably be told, "We don't have that much money in the vault." Even if they could fulfill your request, the process would require special arrangements, taking several days or weeks. The cash might need to be ordered from a central cash depot, and security measures would be necessary to transport such a large amount. Plus, you'd likely face a lot of paperwork due to anti-money laundering laws, which would closely examine such a large withdrawal before it could be approved. In 2020, Linus Dunkers, a Swedish Bitcoin trader, attempted to withdraw 10 million Swedish kronas, about $1 million US. Despite the bank holding plenty of digital funds, it took nearly 2 weeks to provide the cash, as they had to source it from central reserves. Dunkers expressed frustration, noting that while digital money was easy to access, getting such a large amount of cash was nearly impossible. This example highlights the reality. Large cash withdrawals require much more than simply walking into a bank. The money would likely be held in a central cash depot where cash supplies are managed tightly. And due to Sweden's shift to digital transactions, most banks keep minimal physical cash on site for daily needs, primarily for those rare customers who still rely on it for small amounts. And let's not forget the paperwork. Large cash withdrawals raise suspicions, so you must explain why you need such a significant sum. Anti-money laundering laws would come into play, meaning your transaction could be flagged and investigated before it gets approved. The Swedish Financial Supervisory Authority has strict regulations on cash flow, and any large movement of physical money would trigger extra scrutiny to prevent money laundering or illegal activity. The process could become even more drawn out if the bank finds your request unusual or risky. Though Sweden's shift to digital payments has been largely positive for most, it's not a perfect solution. The cashless revolution isn't moving at the same pace for everyone, leaving some people stuck on the sidelines, particularly the elderly population. Many older Swedes are not ready to embrace digital options like Swish and still prefer using cash for daily transactions, with approximately 10% continuing to rely on it regularly. But it's not just older people. In remote rural areas of Sweden with bad internet access, cash is king simply because there isn't a good digital replacement. Many others lack smartphones or the ability to use a banking app. The concern is that as Sweden marches towards its cashless future, it might leave one of the most vulnerable groups behind. Across Europe, more countries are steadily moving toward cashless societies, and the benefits of speed, efficiency, and transparency are clear. In countries like Norway and Denmark, the shift is already well underway. Norway is considered one of the most cashless societies in Europe, with only about 3 to 4% of all payments being made in cash. Similarly, Denmark aims to become completely cashless by 2030, with nearly all transactions currently being handled digitally. As more countries become cashless, financial exclusion concerns have become more noticeable. Studies by the European Central Bank suggest that 15 to 20% of people across Europe still rely on cash for various reasons. But perhaps the most concerning issue isn't just access or preference, it's what happens if digital systems fail. That's exactly what happened in 2018. During the Visa outage, the European payment network went down for several hours, leaving millions unable to use their Visa cards for transactions. Businesses couldn't process payments, travelers were stuck, and people were left in shops or restaurants without a way to pay. While card transactions were halted, cash remained functional, highlighting the risks of relying solely on digital systems. Visa later identified a hardware failure as the cause, but the incident raised serious concerns about the vulnerability of cashless systems, especially in countries moving quickly toward a cashless future. This pushed places like Germany, where cash is still widely used, to be cautious about going fully cashless, viewing the outage as a reminder of the need for reliable backup options. It will be no surprise if, 10 years from now, the world is fully dependent on digital payments. While many view this shift as inevitable and convenient, significant concerns exist that this could lead to negative consequences most people might not expect. Banks and governments have a lot of control over people. They could freeze accounts, stop people from accessing their money, or track every purchase. Privacy would disappear because every financial move would leave a digital trail that banks, companies, or even hackers could see. Also, if cash were to disappear, it could increase social inequality. People without access to banks or those with bad credit could be left out of the system completely. Survival might depend on having a digital presence, leaving those without it, like the unbanked or people experiencing poverty, feeling even more left behind. To answer the question, you could technically withdraw $1 million in cash, but doing so would be highly impractical. Most banks in Sweden aren't equipped to handle such a large cash request because they don't stockpile much physical currency anymore. You'd have to go through a lengthy process involving special orders, security measures, and significant delays, perhaps taking weeks. Even if you managed to get the cash, you'd quickly realize that Sweden's infrastructure needs to be built to handle large sums of physical money. In a world where digital transactions dominate, relying on cash is becoming less practical daily, signaling that the future is firmly set in a cashless direction, whether we're ready or not.